So we gotta make some space in the greenhouse. So today our big job is that we're gonna be ripping out a bunch of our basil and making pesto.
August and September are busy times for us because we got lots of food to make for the rest of the year. Tonight we're making lots of pesto for the freezer. When we have lots of pesto made, then we can add it easily to our pasta sauces and, you know, just have pesto pasta as well for the remainder of the year. So what the basic concept is, I mean, you probably know what pesto is. We've got tons of basil coming out of the garden right now and some garlic. We're gonna put it in the food processor with some oil and Parmesan, and we're gonna make a bunch of pesto that we can then put in muffin trays, or we used to use ice cube trays, and then throw it in the freezer. And after it's frozen, then remove it, put it in bags for storage in the freezer so that you've got easy to, you know, dole out portions of pesto for your cooking for the rest of the year. So a little bit of extra work, you know, long nights for during the harvest season makes for a ton of easy meals for the rest of the season. So a little bit of work goes a long way. Check it out.
We don't have a set recipe that we follow for our pesto. One of the reasons why is you never know how strong your garlic is or how sweet or spicy your basil is. So I recommend just doing it to taste. Basically, we start with garlic, and we like garlic, so we put lots in. I start with garlic because it is a little bit bigger and chunkier. So I let this run first to chop it up, and then I add in the basil. Normally we use a shredded Parmesan, but we need a lot of it right now, and we didn't want to use all that plastic, so getting this big hunk of unshredded Parmesan, just a slice of the wheel, was kind of the better way to go. Normally I put this in at the very end, but because I want to basically chop it up without putting in the effort of grating it, I'm going to add it in with the garlic. We have a lot of basil to get through, so what I do is I fill it up to the point that I can't cram any more in, and then that is the amount that I do per batch, basically. The food processor, if you try to put too much in, at least my food processor, if you put too much in, it doesn't work properly. And I find that this is kind of the perfect level of most per batch without it wrecking it. And it takes a little bit. Quite often I grind it and then I push everything down on the sides and then I grind it. I think we can get a bit more in there still. We'll have to eat lots of pesto. Another ingredient that normally is used in pesto is some sort of nut, like a pine nut, or people really like walnuts or hazelnuts in with garlic or basil pesto, but we're too cheap. We'll spend our money on the oil instead, and maybe we can add in some ground walnuts out of the ones that we picked up after they dry out a little bit. I use a lot of oil in it. I find if you don't use enough oil, it just gets a little bit dried out when it goes into the freezer. A lot of these pucks will actually be in the freezer for 6 months, and the more oil we use, the better they basically keep, like without drying out, because there's not a ton of liquid in there, so don't be worried about using too much oil. The final step I do is I grind it all up for a while until the oil and the pesto mix together and starts to turn a little bit of a creamy texture, and a creamy kind of changes the color. And you want to make sure that everything's chopped up nicely. If you have big chunks in there, it's not going to spread out well. Or what do you think? When I do multiple batches, I like to put it into a container and stir the different batches all together so that it blends in all the flavors and makes it so they all taste the same, rather than one's a little bit spicier because I use more garlic, or one has more cheese. It's just a better way to get a balance of all the different flavors, and also makes it so if, you know, in my first recipe or my last recipe I use too much garlic and it's not quite how we like it, then it kind of fixes my mistake by doing that. But we like it spicy. We like it with so much garlic that it's spicy. It's like, oh, burns everything. And repeat. The final step that we do on the pesto is that we put it into either these mini muffin tins or one of these oversized muffin tins, and then, you know, on these ones just put a liner in there because that makes it easier to pull out. These, they have to defrost a little bit before the pucks will actually pop out. And we put it in there and we freeze it up, and basically, like, this is like the perfect size for just getting that fresh basil flavor into your recipe. And then this is a good size for when we do our pasta sauces that we do a lot. And from this point you can take them and you can throw them into a Tupperware, you can throw them into a Ziploc bag and throw them into the freezer, and they're loose and they don't stick together, so you can just grab that single piece and have it for going into your recipes, and it works really well for us. These they freeze actually really quickly. They'll be ready like within a couple hours. We usually end up doing this kind of stuff at night, and then by the next morning they're ready to go. They're ready to get popped out of these tins and get the next batch going. We've heard of using ice cube tray instead of these tins. That was where we originally got the idea, but the issue with the ice cube trays was that usually they were plastic, and the flavor of our super strong, super garlicky pesto would get into the plastic and then we wouldn't be able to reuse them. Whereas these, being metal, we don't have to worry about anything. They're good to go for actually doing muffins and cupcakes or whatever else we use them for as soon as they're washed up. We have a lot of basil to process right now, so we're pretty busy making pesto. This is still not even half of what we have in the greenhouse. If you guys use a different recipe for your pesto, let us know below. We're always interested in trying new things and changing it up. And don't forget to subscribe.